We come, Lord, just as we are. And we step into your embrace. Open our hearts, open our minds, open our spirits to the depth of your love, that we may lift up our voices and all that we are in praise of you. Let's join together to say the words on the screen. Praise the Lord. How good it is to sing praises to our God. How pleasant and fitting to praise him. Before we move on to the word, our reading from Esther, we're going to spend a little bit of time doing contemplation. And Margot's going to lead us in that. I'm just going to talk us through it. So get yourselves comfortable.
Going to take our time over this prayer. First of all, I'm going to read it out slowly, a line at a time, with pauses, so that you can think about it. Think about the words, let them sink in, let them speak to you. At the end, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to again look at the words again, see which particular line maybe speaks to you, or if it prompts you to think of something else. And then after that, I'm going to invite you to share that line with somebody, either with your neighbour, or if you'd like to share it with everybody, just stand up or come up to the front. If you're online, could share with each other or in the box. We're not going to comment on what other people said. We're just going to take what the Lord has said to each one of us into our hearts. And then at the end, I'm going to read it again. Christ has no body but yours. No hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are his body. Christ has no body now but yours. Now is your moment to share which lines spoke most to you, maybe jumped out to you, with your neighbour or with the whole group. Thank you. I'm going to read this again. Christ has no body but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes with which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good. Yours are the hands with which he blesses all the world. Yours are the hands, yours are the feet, yours are the eyes, you are his body. Christ has no body now, but yours. I'm going to leave you in silence for a minute. You might like to read it again in your head, perhaps replacing the word yours with mine. Christ has no body, but mine.
Perhaps hold that in mind as we revisit Esther. If you remember, one of the lines in Esther was, if not you, then who? Or if not you, God will call up somebody else. I'm not going to recap the whole of Esther because you can always watch last week's recording if you want to do that. But last week we looked at cleansing and purifying, preparing for what God has planned for us. Esther was a young girl who was in the king's palace. She was a Jewish girl who had been brought into the palace as a potential queen and ends up being queen. Mordecai is her cousin who had brought her up and was keeping an eye on her. Our reading sort of enters into the time when the Jewish people are praying and fasting because Haman has tricked King Xerxes into killing the Jews. And they're trying to intervene and intercede. So our reading this morning is taken from Esther 4:13 to 5:2.
Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape when all the other Jews are killed. If you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place, but you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for just such a time as this? And Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, I will go in to see the king. If I must die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting on his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter.
Thank you, Christine. So if you remember from last week, if you were able to catch up, last week we were getting ready. This week it's getting set for the games to begin. The games beginning was a word that was given to us as a church when we were at the Pioneer Conference. So get set is about recognising your godly purpose and position and getting yourself into place. A bit like a runner as they get set into those running blocks, or a horse rider in the stalls. It's sort of aligning yourself, straightening yourself up and getting into place. I was struck by the story of Dame Sarah's story, who is a Paralympian. She's pretty well known with many medals in swimming and cycling. She was born without a functioning left hand after her arm became entangled in the umbilical cord in the womb. But despite this, she became a medal-winning Paralympic swimmer. She had 2 gold, 3 silver, and a bronze medal by the age of 14. Because of her success, she was bullied at school. They didn't like her. And it was a nitpicky but persistent sort of way. So that sort of way that you can't do a lot about it, really. And she eventually became anorexic. With the support of her family, she overcame this, and at the age of 19, she had won 5 gold medals. 5 gold medals. She was struggling, though, with chronic fatigue syndrome. Carried on, being successful, but when persistent ear problems reportedly led her to take up cycling instead of swimming to maintain her fitness, she found that she also excelled at that. She has gone on to be a Paralympic cycling medal winner. She has married and had 2 children, and she thought that would be the end of her career, and that perhaps it was time to end competing. But her son, Charlie, reportedly has said to her she's got to carry on because he wants to go to Paris to watch the games. Now, you might think that I'm drawing attention to Dame Sarah because of her physical attributes, but I'm actually drawing attention to her because of her strength of character, the discipline that she must have had to exercise, and perseverance. Whether she knows it's from God or not, her gift has to be worked at, her physical gift and her mental gifts. And I suspect that she's quite a determined character off the track, or out of the pool as well as on it. Life didn't deal her all the best cards. She had to adapt. And so did Esther. If you're thinking, well, how does that all link to Esther? She was orphaned, adopted, captured, forced to marry a probably older man, living in exile from her people as queen of a foreign land. And now she's in the unenviable position as mediator and peacemaker. She had to get set for this new purpose God had for her. So she got her soul set. She chose to trust and obey above her fear. And she, like Angie just held herself accountable to us, she held herself accountable to Mordecai and the people. She couldn't do it on her own. You can't do it on your own. She got her spirit set. She prayed and she fasted. She sort of aligned herself with God, seeking to focus on his presence and his peace. I'll just say that doesn't mean an absence of fear. It just means knowing that he is with you in it. She got her body set. She put on her royal robes. She didn't approach the king all despaired and looking, really bad. She dressed the part. My mum was always going on about, if you look the part, you'll be okay. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that's a way of living, but in this case, she made sure that she looked the part. She was the queen, and she made sure she stepped up to that. And she had her mind set. She said, I will go to the king. I will do it. regardless of the consequences. If I perish, I perish. Very often we won't perish, but we might have to perhaps die to pride. She set her mind on what she had to do, just as Dame Sarah did, even though she was being bullied. Esther set her will to God's will, and that takes faith, obedience, strength of character, self-awareness, and discipline. She then positioned herself where she could step into God's purposes. She stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. She waited for the right time. You know, so often God gives us the right time for something. Things just line up. She didn't go storming in there and say, I need to talk to you. She just put herself in his eye line. And at the right time, he called her forward. I wonder what character you identify with in this story of Esther that we've looked at over the last couple of weeks. Is it Esther, feeling a little young and inexperienced? Perhaps it's Vashti, who was the queen before Esther, who stood up for herself and moral dignity. Or maybe Mordecai, who knew his obligations and is faithful to God above all. Who knows if perhaps you were made gardener, business analyst, HR manager, grandma, teaching assistant, for just such a time as this. Think back over your week, what you have just lived through. What springs up into your memory? What do you think God was saying in those experiences? In the important and the dramatic and the mundane? What was he saying in the moments of joy or confusion? The moments where there was a sense of freedom, or the moments of a sense of guilt or missed opportunity? Where did you feel that you were connected to God and his purposes? Now think ahead to next week. Where might God want you, or even us as his church, his body, to be positioned to share our gifts and character for his purposes? Is there anything that you experienced last week or that he said to you that helps you get set for next week and beyond? Don't despise the small things, as God delights in small beginnings as well as dramatic ones. It's love. So I encourage you to keep looking, to keep asking God, how can he use you? God of amazing grace, you entrust to each one of us the gift of your life. You live in us. You strengthen us in our weakness. You send us. You invite us to treasure you and to notice you at work in the world. May the threads of our lives, the mundane and the spectacular, speak of you, that your love may overflow to others and the whole world. Amen.